Walk through any old city in Europe, Paris, London, Edinburgh, Rome. Now look at the buildings. Really look at them. You will notice something that does not make sense. Windows underground, doors that open into solid earth, entire floors buried beneath the street. And when you ask why, they give you a simple answer. Street level change. Over centuries, the ground rose, pavement was added, buildings sank. Natural process. Nothing to see here. But that explanation falls apart the moment you actually examine what is down there, because these are not flooded basements. These are not foundations. These are full rooms, with ceilings, with architecture, with windows that once let in sunlight. Something was living down there, and someone buried it. The question is why. And more importantly, who decided we should not ask? If you stop walking, kneel down on the concrete, and peer through the iron grates of these half-buried windows, the official story shatters. You will see full-size arch windows, beautifully designed, with frames meant to welcome the morning sun. Yet they are now sitting just inches above the asphalt, staring directly into the dirt. Why would master architects waste time, money, and labor carving decorative lintels and setting expensive glass for rooms that were supposedly always meant to be underground? You do not put ornate masonry inside a basement. You do not install large, sun-facing windows for a coal cellar. This material waste defies the laws of economics and human logic. It proves that when these structures were first built, the ground level was much lower than it is today. And it suggests that the world we see on the surface is just the tip of a much older, much larger architectural iceberg. Paris is the obvious place to start. Beneath the city of light lies a city of darkness. The catacombs stretch for hundreds of miles. But that is not what we are talking about. Look at the buildings along the Seine. Old houseman structures from the 1800s. Beautiful facades. Grand entrances. Now walk to the alley beside the building. Look down. There is a window, half buried. You can see the top arch. The glass is gone. The frame remains. And it goes straight into a room that no one talks about. Tourists walk past it every day. They photograph the architecture above. They never look down, because the guidebooks do not mention it. The plaques do not explain it. And the tour guides will tell you it is just how the street was built. But streets do not build windows. People do. Someone built that floor. Someone lived in that room. And someone buried it under dirt and pavement and called it progress. Edinburgh tells the same story, but louder. The old town sits on a ridge. And beneath the ridge, there are vaults. Hundreds of them. Sealed for centuries. When they were finally opened in the 1980s, archaeologists found rooms. Not caves. Not tunnels. Rooms with fireplaces. Rooms with shelves. Rooms where people cooked and slept and lived their lives. The official explanation is that these were storage spaces, cellars beneath the street. But here's the problem. These rooms have windows. Storage rooms do not need windows. And these windows do not face the street. They face outward, into rock, into earth, as if the earth was placed there after the building was complete, as if someone deliberately buried a living space and pretended it never existed. The guides call it street-level change. The rooms call it something else. They call it a lie. When archaeologists excavated these vaults, they did not find them decommissioned slowly over time. They were abandoned in a rush. They found shoes, tools, cooking pots, and personal belongings. People do not leave their belongings behind if they are calmly relocating. This was a forced displacement, a sudden event. The city raised the street, completed the bridge, and an entire community of the working poor was entombed alive beneath the new pavement. No records were kept of their displacement. No historical plaques honor their memory. Just a smooth new road surface and a narrative about modern hygiene. Rome is even more dramatic. Walk through the historic center, and you will see buildings from the Renaissance, from the medieval period, from ancient times. And at the base of almost every old structure, there's a floor that is now underground. You can see the entrance, a door that goes into darkness, steps that descend below the sidewalk. And when you go inside, you find rooms that match the architecture above. Same style, same construction, same era. These are not additions. These are not basements carved later. These are the original ground floors. The buildings were once one story shorter, or the ground was once much lower. But the official explanation does not account for the consistency. Every old city has the same pattern. Every old city buried its first floors. And every old city gives the same dismissive answer. Street level change. As if the ground simply decided to rise. As if pavement accumulated on its own. London has its own version of this buried history. Beneath the modern financial district, there are Roman ruins, medieval cellars, and Tudor foundations sitting at a depth that makes no sense unless you understand what happened. In the 1700s and 1800s, London raised its streets dramatically. Some areas were elevated by 10 feet or more. New sewers were installed, new road surfaces were laid, and the old ground level became the new basement. Walk through London today, and you are walking on a platform. Beneath your feet is another city. A city that was once at street level, where people walked and worked. Now it is sealed in darkness. This is not just a Western European phenomenon. It stretches all the way to Russia. In Moscow, during modern utility excavations, workers dug up the street and found 18th century building facades buried 20 feet deep. These were not just stone foundations. They were beautiful brick arches with glass windows still intact. There is no historical record in Moscow of a massive civil engineering project to raise the streets by 20 feet. To fill a city with 20 feet of dirt will require millions of tons of earth, thousands of horses, and decades of labor. It would be in every tax record, every newspaper, and every personal diary. Yet there is nothing but silence in the archives. This forces us to consider a terrifying question. Were the streets raised, or was the world buried from above? In the 19th century, massive urban renewal projects swept across the world. Old cities were rebuilt, streets were raised, and drainage systems were installed. The official reason was sanitation. Disease was spreading through the old quarters. Typhus, cholera, and plague. The lower floors were damp, dark, and dangerous. So city planners decided that instead of demolishing thousands of buildings, they would raise the streets. They filled in the lower levels with rubble and told residents to use the new entrance on the second floor. It was practical, efficient, and it buried an entire layer of history. But the mathematics of these projects do not add up when you look at the scale. Consider the United States. In Seattle, after the Great Fire of 1889, the city decided to raise the streets by a full story to combat flooding. Retaining walls were built. Dirt was dumped, and the original ground floors became the famous Seattle Underground. This is documented history, so we accept it. But what about Chicago? In the 1850s, Chicago pulled off one of the greatest engineering feats in history. They lifted entire city blocks, massive brick buildings, using thousands of jack screws, while businesses inside continued operating. They did this to install a new sewer system. It was documented in newspapers and photographs. But if it takes millions of dollars and massive technology to lift a single block in Chicago, how did cities all over the world raise thousands of miles of streets in total silence without single newspaper headlines? Look at Omaha, Nebraska. The Bemis Bag building was built in 1887. Early photographs show it sitting on a flat, normal street. Today, the street is raised, and the first floor is completely buried under concrete. When you lift a street, you do not just dump dirt. You have to lift sewer lines, gas lines, water mains, and trolley tracks. The economic and engineering cost of doing this globally in the 1800s without heavy machinery is impossible. The official narrative says this happened through slow accumulation of dirt and dust over centuries. Stratification. They claim cities naturally accumulate dust from horses and with smoke. But if a city can accumulate 20 feet of dirt in 150 years, modern cities like New York should be buried up to their roofs by now. It does not happen. Dirt does not accumulate that fast naturally. The earth came all at once, in a sudden, violent global event that has been quietly erased from our textbooks. Look at the architectural style of these buried cities. Red brick, classical domes, hand-carved stone pillars. This unified global style stretches from San Francisco to Vladivostok, from Buenos Aires to Cape Town. How did a 19th century civilization, supposedly using horses and wooden wheels, erect millions of tons of hand-carved granite palaces all across the globe simultaneously? Today, If a construction firm tries to recreate a classical 19th century government building using heavy cranes and laser-cutting computers, it costs billions of dollars. How did a primitive society do it in thousands of cities, only to bury the first floor in dirt immediately afterward? The truth is, they did not build these cities. They found them. The humans of the late 19th century were not the pioneers of a new world. They were scavengers inheriting the bones of a lost, high-technology civilization. This previous world was unified, aesthetically brilliant, and powered by wireless atmospheric energy. When a sudden cataclysm, a massive mud flood, swept across the planet, it buried the lower levels of their grand architecture. The survivors emerged from the devastation to find beautiful, empty cities half buried in clay. They did not have machinery to clear millions of tons of mud from the streets. So they did the only practical thing survivors do. They cleared out the second floors, converted the windows into doors, built wooden walkways over mud, and eventually paved it over with concrete. They inherited a ready-made world and wrote a fake history to claim they built it themselves. They wrote the textbooks to erase the mud flood, labeling the anomalies as street-level changes. The technology to prove this exists right now. Ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR, and muon tomography could scan the soil beneath old cities in a matter of days. We could analyze the clay to see if it is urban debris or sterile, cataclysmic mud. But no university will fund this research. Any professor who questions the official timeline or mentions a mud flood is instantly mocked and denied tenure. The academic system operates on rigid categories. Funding is only awarded to research that fits inside the established box. It is not a conspiracy of active intent, but a passive loop of institutional inertia. Ideas that are unfamiliar do not get tested, and untested ideas do not get published. So the loop remains closed, and the half-buried windows keep staring into dirt without an answer. Think of Beethoven's tuning fork. It vibrates at 455 hertz in a glass case in the British Library. Modern pianos are used to a standard he never used. The bells that once held that ancient resonance were melted down for cannons during industrial wars. But the stone buildings designed to resonate with those bells still stand. The stone carries the architectural memory, even if nothing feeds it anymore. We are walking on top of the roofs of a forgotten civilization. Every time you walk down a street in Boston, London, or Paris, you are stepping over the eyes of the past. The half-buried windows are watching us, waiting for us to awaken to the truth. Arithmetic always wins over ideology. You can't erase history written in stone. The map we are using is missing a chapter, time, and scale. The receipts are public. The ledgers are readable, and the half-buried windows are still waiting for someone to ask the right question. Many of the original architects of our modern historical timeline are no longer around to answer for their decisions, leaving a new generation of bureaucrats to apologize for the past while they repeat the exact same mistakes in the present. If we do not demand accountability, if we do not demand that our leaders face the cold equations of reality, then our future will be just another domino in a line that takes down the entire modern worldview, proving that no nation, no matter how great, can survive if it chooses to ignore the receipts of its own history. Every single arch, every stone block, and every sunken level is a direct confrontation of the lies we tell ourselves to maintain a sense of supremacy. We believe we built the world from primitive huts, but the red bricks and classical domes that stretch from San Francisco to Vladivostok show a unified global architectural standard that modern construction firms cannot recreate today, even with heavy cranes and steel reinforcements. Why was there a single aesthetic style used globally before the late 19th century? Why do buildings in Shanghai match the buildings in Buenos Aires and Cape Town? The unified world before the mud flood was a connected high-technology realm that was reduced to rubble, leaving us to crawl through the mud, clean out the second floors, and pretend we were the pioneers who conquered the wild. We are not pioneers. We are scavengers inhabiting the bones of a lost civilization, and the buried windows are the eyes of the past looking back at our ignorance, waiting for us to awaken to the truth of what we were, what we are, and what we might become if we dare to look beneath the concrete. In the end, it will not be the historians or the politicians who reveal the truth. It will be the earth itself as it slowly pushes the buried truth back to the surface, forced upward by the unyielding laws of physics and time, demanding a reckoning for the history we forgot. The mud may have hidden the architecture, but preserve the proof, and all it takes is one look through a half-buried window on your way to work to realize that the world you know is built on top of a world that you forgot. Don't look away, because the answers are waiting right beneath your feet, and they are written in stone. You must understand that every single city we inhabit is just a renovation of a much grander past. When we look at the precision of the underground archways, we are looking at a master craftsmanship that modern engineering would struggle to duplicate. We are told that illiterate peasants built these stone monoliths with primitive iron tools, yet the geometric perfection of the vaulted ceiling says otherwise. How did builders in a pre-industrial age synchronize architectural standards across separated continents? If there was no internet and no global shipping lanes, how did red brick Gothic palaces appear simultaneously in New York, St. Petersburg, and Sydney? The official narrative relies on the assumption that you will never look up and you will never look down. But if you dare to step off the paved sidewalk and into the shadows of the alleyways, you will find original door frames sitting 6 feet below the concrete, waiting to be rediscovered. These are the physical receipts of a civilization that was wiped out, leaving us to move into their ruins and slap our names on the door. It is time we open our eyes to the world beneath the concrete, because the stone does not lie. It only waits for someone to read it.